Good morning, Ram Nation. We are back with another edition of DNVR Rams Live. As always, I'm your host, Justin Michael. We've got a lot to talk about today. We're going to talk about the latest 2025 CSU football commit, Sione Netane, 6'5", 330-pound offensive lineman out of St. Francis High School out in California. I will get into a couple of thoughts on him and that 2025 class later on in the show. We're also going to go down memory lane a little bit. We're going to talk Gian Clavell. He is one of 3 CSU representatives out in Paris for the Olympics this summer. Really cool. It's cool to see Sony Rams accomplishing great things on a global level. But it was also fun to kind of go back through the game logs and watch some of the highlights and just kind of reminisce back to when Clavell was in Fort Collins. That was early on in my media career. CSU women's basketball, CSU men's basketball were the first beats I covered full time. And it was just really cool. I think you guys are going to enjoy it. Here in the first segment, we are going to talk about Lieutenant Colonel John Mosley. CSU is going to be retiring his number 14 across all of sports. If you're wondering, athletes that are currently wearing number 14, they will be able to continue to do so, but there won't be any new athletes in the future. Torrey Horton, obviously number 14, so that's kind of a big focus amongst fans. What does that mean for Torrey? I saw Terry Fry, who's written about John Mosley at length. We're going to have him on the show here pretty soon. He posted that it would be a nice gesture if the athletes currently wearing 14 would essentially, change numbers in recognition of John Mosley. I get what he's saying. It would be a nice gesture, but at the same time, you're not gonna force your star football player to change numbers if he doesn't want to. I mean, John Mosley, rest in peace, obviously passed in 2015. So I don't think it really changes much, but I just think it's a long overdue recognition of one of the most important people in the history of our state, but certainly in the history of CSU. If you're unaware of what Mosley's legacy is, he was one of the first Black players at CSU. John Hearn, who's a wonderful historian at CSU, actually was able to go back and find that Mosley was the second. There was one more in the early 1900s. But he's just an incredible human being. I mean, he was an honor student at Manual High School, walked onto the football team, ultimately was a multi-year starter, played multiple positions. I was also an all-conference wrestler, which is pretty cool. But I mean, more than his football career, what he did with the Tuskegee Airmen, who are obviously the first Black pilots in the Air Force, is just, it's incredible. He's one of the first bomber pilots in U.S. history in Vietnam and Korea. Actually could have started earlier, but despite being a standout in the process, wasn't drafted early on in World War II. Again, Terry Fry has an awesome piece that kind of just goes back and talks about all this stuff from his life. Again, we're going to have him on the show at some point, but I just think it's a really important person in history, and the fact that it took this long for his number to be retired is kind of inexcusable on CSU's side. John Weber having a great week. I love what they're doing to honor history and to look back at some of these all-time great Rams. But again, I'm not really sure why this wasn't done much earlier. As Henry says in the Toyota chat, absolutely love the work Weber is doing and the direction Amy Parsons has CSU going. That's really encouraging. Again, long-term, we'll see what happens from a winning standpoint. Wins and losses are ultimately what kind of dictate how your legacy is viewed from the fans. But I'm with you guys in the Toyota chat. I think this is a really encouraging direction, and it's just nice to see CSU leaning into this more. I mean, John Hearn, the historian at CSU, has always done great work. I cannot recommend his book, Aggies to Rams, enough if you want to dive into some of the great moments in CSU football history. But, outside of him, I just kind of felt like institutionally, CSU just didn't do enough to recognize some of the great people in program history. And I still feel like there's more that could be done. Honestly, I think Mosley is deserving of a statue. I think Sonny Lubick should have his own statue. And not, I know he has that fat Sonny thing that was the collaboration with New Belgium on the porch. But honestly, the thing freaks me out. It's demonic looking and it's just weird. I just want a traditional Sonny Lubick statue. And no offense to anybody that worked on that project or that likes it. Like, I'm not trying to be that guy. I don't really get it. But I mean, John Mosley is just one of the truly incredible people in U.S. history, and this was long overdue. I love the direction that CSU is doing. I love that they're introducing the Walk of Champions, which is just another way to ensure that athletes are going to be recognized outside of the Hall of Fame. That's obviously still the top honor, but it's just important to keep these people alive, and that's what makes college sports so different, from pro sports, is the tradition and the community and the way it's all intertwined. And I mean, at CSU, we're obviously very fortunate to have had a rich history and just so many people that have gone on to impact the world in so many remarkable ways. And Mosley, more than just about anybody, it's really special that he's finally getting his due. Shout out to everybody in the Toyota chat. I don't really understand the trolls at the moment. You want to troll one of the greatest men in U.S. history? Be my guest. Clowns are gonna clown. I do want to shout out Lucy Nicotine real quick. Level up your nicotine routine with Lucy. 100% pure nicotine, always tobacco free. If you're not a pouch guy, they've got gum. They've got breakers normally. At the moment, a little bit short on those. But what's awesome about Lucy is it's a really smooth process. Some pouches, you put them in, they're going to make you nauseous right away. Not with Lucy. The flavor, it's long lasting. It's a smooth ride throughout. Perfect in the morning, perfect if you're trying to grind out a little bit of work or if you're trying to relax. Level up your nicotine routine with Lucy. Go to lucy.co/Rams. Use that promo code RAMS to get 20% off your first order. Lucy offers free shipping and has a 30-day refund policy if you change your mind. Lucy.co, make sure you use that code RAMS to get 20% off. Always free shipping. And again, cannot recommend them enough. Apple Ice, probably my favorite these days. Mango is really good as well. I also want to shout out Toyota, the official vehicle of DNVR. Toyota trucks have long been a part of their DNA. Toyota builds durable legends that are destined for greatness, perfect for Colorado. They've got 17 models with all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, like the Epic 4Runner. They also offer more low and zero-emission vehicles combined than any other automaker to give customers numerous choices to reduce their carbon footprint. 16 different hybrid vehicles to choose from. Check out the Tundra iForce Max hybrid truck, but not to be outdone. Toyota SUVs take command on the road and on the trail, so you can explore the road less traveled without sacrificing smooth city rides in SUVs like the RAV4 and Grand Highlander. Toyota, a proud partner of CSU Athletics and the official vehicle of DNVR. The Walk of Champions was recently introduced. I get that there are some folks that were left off. Like, I was going through the football list. I was going through the basketball list. There are a couple people that come to mind. Dorian Green, for instance, on the men's basketball side, was a guy that I felt was kind of a big omission. Like BC Johnson, I would have liked to see him honored on the football side. But the point is you can add to it in the future. And the point is they're making an effort. Like, so many times when these projects come out, like it's going to take a little bit of time to honor everybody. I mean, they honored over 500 athletes in this first class alone. I would imagine over the next couple of years, you're going to be able to recognize more people, but it's just cool to be able to look back on the history and to celebrate it and to keep the traditions alive and to, make it known like how much we appreciate what these people did for CSU and what they did for us as fans. Taylor in the Toyota chat wants to know, will the Mosley name be unveiled at the stadium against UNC or during the San Jose State game? It will be unveiled during Ag Day against UNC. So that's when they'll put his name up in the stadium next to Eddie Hanna, obviously, and Greg Myers and Fum McGraw, which is really cool. I'd like to see Trey McBride recognized up there someday. I think some schools, they retire a few too many numbers. CSU maybe didn't retire enough over the years, but I think anybody that wins a national award the way they did, I mean, Greg Myers obviously was, and to be a consensus All-American like that, he'd kind of be the next guy I'd like to see honored. And I'd have to go back through history too and make sure there's nobody like John Mosley that they were missing, but that will be unveiled on Ag Day. Ag Day going to be fun. Can't use the uniforms right now, obviously, on the new college football video game, but there's a surprise coming on that. So hint, hint, keep your eyes out. Let's get into recruiting here. Sione Netane announced his commitment to CSU. 6'5", 330-pound offensive lineman out of St. Francis High School out in California. He's a 3-star prospect, according to 247 Sports. Also has offers from Army, Air Force, and Arizona State. Nice pull for CSU. I had been teasing this commitment for like a month and a half. I mean, I think I found out he committed like around my birthday, which is June 9th. I took an OV early in June. He's not a big social media guy. From what I've heard behind the scenes, like hasn't even had a phone all summer, just wants to spend time with his family. That sounds like a really good, down to earth kid. Obviously huge. I mean, 6'5", 330 is a massive frame to be a junior in high school. He'll play in the interior at CSU. If you watch him on Huddle, plays left tackle, which is unsurprising when you're that big at the high school level. Like they're just going to put you on the blind side. That's just how it's going to work. I think he's going to be a natural fit, though, especially in this air raid system in the interior. I'm not quite sure he has the length. And again, like it's such a limited sample size going off of what you're watching on Huddle. Like you got to see these guys in person to really be able to gauge, how big they are, how quick they're moving, and especially like in contrast to everybody around them. But I mean, 6'5", 330, he looks really comfortable in pass blocking scenarios. I will say there's not a ton of pass blocking reps on his highlight. That could be due to scheme. There aren't that many high school teams out there that are throwing the ball away, throwing the ball around the way you will at CSU. Getting tongue tied here, but I think when you look at the way he moves, the way he uses his size, he's got active hands. Really feel like he's going to be solid in the interior. I assume he's going to be guard, but I'll verify that and with the staff and make sure he's not going to be at center. I like what this staff is doing from just an evaluation standpoint. They're going out, they're getting big-bodied, versatile athletes. He also participates in track, does shot put and discus. And they went out and they got legitimate size. I mean, I try not to be too hyperbolic, and I try not to, be a jerk, I guess, about some of the players that were in that room a couple years ago. But I mean, like outside of Barry Wesley, it was pretty rough at times in the trenches, and that was what was so ironic about the whole Steve Adazio eras. They were not bringing in FBS offensive linemen. They weren't developing anyone. The guys they had, they were running out of town. And when this staff came in, Jay Norvell and Bill Best, from day one, they were like, we got to get bigger. We got to get more athletic. And that's what they've done. I mean, these last two classes, you're averaging out about 6'5", 305 for the 18, 19-year-olds you're bringing in. That's huge. And I mean, you've seen the results on the field these last couple of years. The work that Bill Best has done has been a tremendous, but he's got a really good track record. The offensive lines in Reno for a couple of years there were nasty. And if they could have gotten a couple of those guys, like Aaron Frost, who ended up at Arizona State, for instance, like if you could have got him to come over with Jacob Gardner and, maybe one other guy, they had another guy that ended up at a P4 as well. I think that 2022 season potentially goes a lot different. But I really like the work they're doing with the trenches right now. They finally have NFL-sized offensive linemen. I mean, 6'5", 305, when that's your median, that really says something. They're going out and they're getting great size in this class. You look at Braden Thompson, like 6'8", 315. Contez Allen out of Georgia, who they also brought in. He's like 6'4", 285. And now, obviously, Sione Netane at 6'5", 330. That's just significant. And you can see the difference, when you're playing some of these other Mountain West schools. Like, if you're gonna drop back and throw the ball 60 times a game, you've got to have some beef up front and be able to protect your quarterback. I really am encouraged about the direction of the offensive line under Bill Best. I think he's done great work. I think he's highly underrated, and I think the guys that they're bringing in are really intriguing. Now, it is one of those situations where you're probably not going to see him on the field for a couple of years, hopefully. I mean, unless they just pop right away like that. That's outside of the rare like 4 or 5-star guy, or just the rare freshman that does pop. It does happen. Like a guy is able to play his way onto the field. You got to give him time to develop, and that's huge. But it's nice that you're also in a position where you aren't completely reliant on first and second year players and having to play these guys out of necessity. Instead, you're able to build the depth organically over a couple year period, give these guys a chance to get in the weight room, to get their body right, get a chance to get those reps and to learn the system, to become comfortable with everything that you've got to master at this level. And obviously, like, there's no guarantee in the recruiting game. Like that, I just try and point out what's intriguing about these guys, and you hope that it pans out. But everything I've heard about Netane behind the scenes is really, really encouraging. He moves well for a guy with that kind of size. I love how active his hands are. Again, maybe not the most length in the world for a guy at 6'5". I'd be interested to see what his wingspan would be, and I think it makes a lot of sense to move him in the interior. But it's just tough to gripe when you're bringing in 6'5", 330 dudes at 17, 18 years old. And I think there's just a lot that this staff can do with that. As far as where the 2025 class is at right now, you're at 10 public verbal commits, all high school players. We'll see what happens, from the portal and all that as well this winter. 3 offensive linemen, 2 defensive linemen, 2 wide receivers, 1 linebacker, 1 safety, and 1 punter. They did have the 1 decommit, Michael Dever, not 100% sure on that pronunciation. Out of Lubbock, he flipped from CSU to Texas Tech. That whole situation was odd, I'll admit. Texas Tech was his first offer, so I don't know what happened there. I mean, it's a process. I get it. Sometimes you think you want to go one way 1 week, and then 1 week later, you're feeling completely different at 17, 18 years old. It's a huge decision. I certainly have an appreciation for the guys that make their commitment and then they're locked in and that's it. It's hard to do too. I get it when some of the bigger schools come sniffing, like, Cannon Valenzuela, for instance, is a really great example of a player who really wasn't recruited very much on a national level. Like Army, Air Force, and CSU were pretty much the only FBS schools that were after him. Now, going into his senior year, he's starting to pop at some of the 7-on-7 drills and like some of the camps. And now you're seeing like schools like Houston come around. I will say it seems like the Valenzuela family are still very much committed to CSU. When I had him on the show, he said that he, was 100% committed. He's not even going to take any more visits. We'll see if that still remains true. But his family's posted a lot of like confirming stuff, just in terms of like when other people are committing. You're seeing a lot of Ram Grit posts, they're retweeting stuff. Like that's always a great sign. But it's interesting to see kind of how this process plays out. And that's kind of the tough balance you have to swing as a staff, right? Like if you are recruiting these guys and then all of a sudden big schools come swooping in, you're probably doing something right. It's also just annoying because I think there's a lot of lazy recruiters out there at bigger schools that essentially just let some of the smaller schools do all the work and then try and, be like the shark lingering in the water that comes in and swoops you up. All the power to you, I guess, but it's just kind of an annoying process. Taylor in the Toyota chat wants to know, O-line quietly becoming a strength to this team. Any player getting Service Academy offers is good in my book. Hey, I'm with you, man. One, if you're getting offers from the Service Academy that speaks to your character and intelligence, it's not easy to get into those schools. They don't recruit just anybody for that reason. It would be a waste of their time. On top of that, I mean, especially I can speak much more with Air Force than I can with Army or Navy. I enjoy watching those programs, but I really tend to only see them play like in the Service Academy games. But Air Force obviously is a school I've had a front row view of, and have really been locked in for 2 decades on. And the thing about Air Force, like, I think it's kind of the belief nationally that the Service Academy teams, like, they're smaller and so they're less physical or something like that. It's all just this quirky scheme that allows them to have success. And for a while, that probably was the case. If you look at what those teams have done, Air Force in the trenches, these last couple of years, I mean, they've had some really solid athletes on both sides of the ball. I mean, Karras was a great tackle. On the defensive line, they've had some beast of athletes, and Peyton Zadroic, who's back in the interior this year on the D-line. He's a stud. Like, to me, if Calhoun is going after you, that's encouraging because those teams have kicked everybody's asses in the trenches for the last couple of years. And honestly, they've out-physicaled teams. So I'm with you. I think that's an astute observation. And it's not the worst company to have. It's kind of like when you see guys that have Ivy League offers. Now, sometimes that means athletically their ceiling might not be quite that of some of the other guys, but it's not always a guarantee. And frankly, I'd rather focus on what that means from a positive standpoint. And when you're trying to build a program, like having these type of high character individuals that, very clearly have the ability to go on and excel in areas outside of the football field. Like, I think it's good to have as many of those guys in the building as you can. Yeah, you just want dogs too, like freak athletes that are going to go out and make plays, but it's all about striking that balance. That's why building a program is hard, especially today when you find guys and you find talent, and then you've got to re-recruit them and hang on to them for multiple years because they have the option to leave. The future of the program's bright. I really do think so. I think this year is important. Obviously, they've got to find success, and I feel like we've had this rant every single day, so I don't want to get too much in it. The time to strike is definitely now, but it does feel like they have a big opportunity to turn the corner here. And you start winning some games, you keep recruiting the way you have these last couple of years, you keep bringing in the level of talent that you brought in from the high school ranks, you are going to find success. Like, you're just bound to. I will say, when your future is this bright, you might have to put on some shades. Our friends at Shady Rays have you covered, and you can get 35% off when you use the code DNVR. Get ready for the season ahead. Maybe you want to be rocking them come tailgate season. Maybe you're just chilling in the backyard, but you need a pair of Shady Rays. They're rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. Durable frames, extremely clear optics. They've got a million different styles, so they've got something for you. Like, honestly, I think every person on the DNVR staff has multiple pairs of Shady Rays, and I'm not sure I've seen anybody overlap yet. Exclusively for our listeners, Shady Rays is giving out their best deal this season. Use that code DNVR at shadyrays.com and get 35% off polarized sunglasses. Try for yourself. The shades rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. I also want to shout out Coors Light. Guys, life can get chaotic. You guys know it. Football season's going to be a lot. It's also going to be fun, whether you're celebrating, whether you are trying to get over a brutal loss. It's important to make sure you stay in the right mindset. Coors Light encourages you to choose a chill mindset. Once you get in that right vibe, crack open an ice cold Coors Light. When those mountains turn blue, it's as cold as the Rockies. Crisp and refreshing, baby. Make the most out of the times you choose to chill. Choose Coors Light. Get Coors Light delivered straight to your door by going to CoorsLight.com/DNVR. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. If you guys can give us a thumbs up on YouTube, I certainly would appreciate it. If you guys have any questions, send them my way. I will get to as many of them as I can. Appreciate everybody that's locked in with us this morning. We'll be going live pretty consistently throughout the fall. I think it's going to be fun. I'm obviously working on the home studio setup here. Got some CSU swag we got to get dealt with. You can't see it on camera, but I finally have my BC Johnson autographed Vikings jersey up. We got the bronze boot. I mean, it's starting to come together. It's starting to feel like home. Now's the perfect time too. I got the Olympics coming up. I'm a big Olympics fan. I don't know about you guys, but I'm going to be locked in, especially on the basketball side. I mean, as a diehard Nuggets fan, I'm super intrigued to see what happens with Team Serbia. Admittedly, I tend to be ride or die for USA, even if I don't know a ton. That said, I'm struggling with this Team USA team, guys. They're kind of unlikable. Like Embiid and Devin Booker and KD. Like, it's not the most endearing crew. I'm not a LeBron hater by any means. One of my favorite athletes of all time. I'll admit that Lakers era LeBron has worn me thin a little bit. He always had some tendencies, some quirks to whine a little bit. I can admit that, as much as I enjoyed him growing up. But this Team USA team, I don't know. There's something about him. I feel guilty. It feels wrong to say that I might be rooting against them, but also at the same time, I've got Jokic on Serbia, and I've got Gian Clavell on Puerto Rico in the same group as Team USA. I'm a little bit torn, and I want to reminisce a little bit about Gian Clavell. He's one of 3 CSU athletes out in Paris for the Olympics. Lauren Gale for Team Canada and Mustafa Hassan will be competing for Egypt in shot put and discus. Gale, a sprinter, I believe, definitely a track athlete. Clavell averaged 15 points a game over 70 games with CSU. He was the 2016-17 Mountain West Player of the Year. I was all conference that season, was also all defense. Really versatile player, really tough. One of the most clutch individuals I've ever seen. Just could always hit the big shot in the big moments. He made the All Mountain West tournament team his senior year as well. Looking back on his career, he started as a 6-man on that 27-win team in 2014-15. Still kills me that team didn't get an opportunity in the NCAA tournament. I do think there was some validity to them being snubbed with how just weak the non-conference schedule was. You go back and look at it. They had like one quality win in the non-con, or maybe two. They beat CU and New Mexico State. So I'll say they had two, and at least that one was a true road win. But when you look at that team, man, so much talent on paper. JJ Avila, Stanton Kidd, Daniel Bejarano. That's kind of the leading trio. You've got Gian coming off the bench. You've got John Gillen running the point. Teal Daniels, Joe Deciman. I mean, that team was stacked, and I really wish we could have had an opportunity to see him play in the tourney. Really, that the senior year was kind of when Gian was a star, but I mean, he was on pace to kill it in 2015-16. Over the first 10 games, he had double-digit figures in every game that season. He had 35 in a double overtime loss to UTEP. If you remember that 2015-16 team, really, they kind of underwhelmed. They're a 500 team. And Gian, after the Greeley game, got hurt. He broke his hand, was out for the year. But he was on pace to tear it up. Like I said, he had scored double-digit figures in every game. And the thing about Gian was he was going to let that thing fly. Was averaging 15 attempts per game at the time. Didn't skip a beat when he came back his senior year, averaged 20 points a game his last year in the program. He and Emmanuel Amagbo accounted for 40% of the points that year. It was absurd. If you factor in Prentice, it was probably like 60% just with that trio right there. He had a ton of great moments over the years, and like obviously he dropped 35 on the road against UTEP. Like that's a huge performance. There were a lot of ones that I could highlight, but to me, if you really want to talk about like how special he was that senior year, it comes down to the March especially. But it did kind of start in January when he had, I would say, the most impressive individual performance I've ever seen from a CSU basketball player. It's close. I mean, Isaiah Stevens, he had a handful of moments. Neat Clifford was incredible down the stretch this past year, like a David Roddy against Creighton a couple years ago. I mean, there've been a lot of examples, but what Gian did on late January in 2017, they go into Viejas and he drops 37, including the game-winning layup with just like a couple of seconds left, goes coast to coast, finishes in traffic. And that was the thing about Gian, is he would hit these absurdly big shots that were just so difficult. Like he'd be shooting threes from the parking lot with a hand in his face. And it was one of those situations where I got to imagine as a coach, you're like, no. Oh, yes, it went in. And he just seemed to do that all the time. But the thing that I loved about Gian is he just was relentlessly competitive. If I had to name like the most relentless individuals I've ever been around, Gian, Trey McBride's definitely up there. I mean, the McBride brothers in general, like Toby is definitely in that conversation too. But Gian just like, that dude would have played with a broken foot, with a broken leg, like especially in that senior stretch when he was trying to lead them to the tournament. You had to basically drag him off the court or he had to foul out. But he had 30 points and a win over Air Force to begin the Mountain West tournament run. Then he had 21 points and 6 steals and a win over San Diego State. If you remember back, CSU beat San Diego State 3 times that year with Gian Clavell. And all 3 of them were comebacks of 14 or more points, which was pretty impressive. They did lose the title game, obviously, to Nevada. He had 30 points in that game. But I mean, to go for 30, then 21 and 6 and 30 over a 3-game span in the Mountain West tournament after just a gauntlet of a season. I mean, they only had 7 eligible scholarship players for like the majority of that year. It was something else. And I'll never forget that team. It was a weird season. It was a super weird season. But you had all these fun moments. You had all these big time performances. multiple buzzer beaters followed by court storms. You got to have it against San Diego State and Wyoming, which, as far as conference wins goes, that's about as good as it gets. I'll just always look back on that team fondly for a lot of reasons. It was one of the first teams I covered, which, certainly played a factor. I was young and green and just excited to be there. And also, though, like that team, just they had some like Tim Tebow to them where it didn't really make sense. I didn't quite understand how they were doing it. I didn't think it was sustainable either, but I knew that I was enjoying the ride and that it made every single game must watch. It was entertaining from start to finish. And, like that's kind of what all you can ask for, especially like as a mid-major fan. It was awesome. And it is a bit of a shame that he never got to be in a tournament, but I'll always look back on that era with him fondly. And I mean, 37 points that on the road against San Diego State. And then he dropped 33 on the road in Lawler against Nevada that same year. Hit like 6 threes. They lost that game. They just had way too much star power. Like Jordan Caroline was on that team. That was before the Martin twins, I think. So it was a while back. I've been covering this team for a long time. But Gian will have the opportunity to rep Puerto Rico out in Paris. If you're wondering what their schedule is, they're in Group C with South Sudan, Serbia, and the U.S. They will play South Sudan on July 28th. That's coming up here, obviously, 3 p.m. Mountain Time. On July 31st, they'll take on Serbia at 9:15 a.m. And then on August 3rd, big matchup with the United States. We'll see if Puerto Rico can make a little bit of history, if they can accomplish an upset. I mean, just making it to the Olympics is already impressive. They were dominant out in their group stage in San Juan, upset a couple of teams to get there in the first place. I'll be rooting for him. And it would not shock me if Gian had like a signature moment off the bench. He's not the star of the team the way that he was, for CSU back in the day. Is kind of a rotational guy, but he's got insane confidence. He's got an ability to stretch the floor. He's never going to back down, like especially in a tight game. If they need somebody to let it fly, Gian's always going to be the first to do so. And I mean, kind of how he performs. It's been a lot of fun between like the summer league and now we've got the Olympics, just having these things to watch as CSU fans and having something to tune into. I mean, obviously, like we don't have baseball. The Rockies they've been more fun of late, but they're rough, and from a CSU standpoint, they just don't factor because we don't have baseball. But it has been really cool. I've enjoyed the summer league a lot. It sounds like Isaiah Stevens will go out to training camp. Does not have a 2-way deal yet, which I don't get that. I'll be honest. And I know they locked down Christopher. I get it. I still think he's going to be comfortably in the NBA this year in some capacity, whether it be with Miami or somebody else. But I am a little surprised that he doesn't have it. It could just be something that they're trying to work out behind the scenes. I mean, obviously the contract stuff that can all get pretty technical. But I to me, he more than proved himself. I thought he was the kind of the thing that made them work, really. I mean, they had a lot of guys that were capable of individually being quality players, but I'm not sure that team meshes the way that it does without Isaiah running the point. And it was kind of cool to see Heat fans experiencing what we did in Fort Collins all those years and just seeing him run the show. Like it's a lot like watching, a master chef at work or something, just somebody who's truly remarkable at their craft and so skilled. It's cool. I'm honestly, I'm a little upset at myself that I didn't pound the table that he's an NBA player even more. Like I do understand why he fell in the draft process. I understand why there was some skepticism because he is an older prospect. He's a little bit undersized. You wish he was more like 6'2", 6'3". If he was, he's getting drafted. If he's 6'3", he's probably a lottery pick. Like that's just the reality of the situation, especially in a weak draft class. But at the same time, like everything he did in summer league was exactly what we watched him do for 5 years. I knew he was capable of stretching the floor. I watched him grow as a shooter and as a scorer over the years. I mean, his growth as a 3-point shooter, it really was impressive. And especially the way that he was able to kind of learn to be adaptive to whatever was around him. He was able to make an impact. If he needed to create his own shot, that was fine. If you could get him a catch and shoot opportunity, that was lethal. But I mean, he was nasty on those opportunities where he was creating for himself. And I don't know. I feel like I let the masses kind of influence me a little bit with some of their skepticism because like, oh, he's older, he's a little undersized, but at the same time, like he's just so smart, so unselfish, and so skilled. I should have pounded the table that he's an NBA player, and I regret that a little bit. So I just wanted to let you guys know. That's all I've got for today's show. I know we're cutting it a little bit short, but it's the heart of the off season. We got camp coming up. Can't wait. Football's in the air. Have all kinds of content for you guys. I appreciate you rocking with me this morning. We'll be back next week as well. Also, we'll have some audio only podcasts that come out this weekend. So make sure you're locked in. You can get those on Spotify, Apple, or you can just go to the DNVR website. Much love, y'all. Always proud to be. Peace.